effective immediately. Any products that you purchase from us, you'll see additional line item on the invoice for the tariff surcharge. This is due to, Donald Trump this and that and blah, blah, blah. Sorry for the inconvenience and sucks to suck.
Thank you for checking out Real Talk Personal Finance. Shit's about to get real. Cash Flow King with you today. And in today's episode, we have Impact of Tariffs on American Manufacturing featuring Big D. Before we get into today's show, just a few quick announcements. I know this show is probably long overdue, and we haven't really put out a heck of a whole lot lately, but we appreciate your patience with us as we try to put out quality content when it's available. We don't like to put out shows just for the sake of putting out shows. I actually listened to a show not too long ago that was literally 8 minutes long, and it's when the market was pretty much in free fall. And the whole point of it was it's this guy promoting his own self-directed IRA company and trying to poo-poo on the stock market and get them to open up an account with his firm. So we don't like to do shit like that. But so here we are. Couple quick announcements, like I said. First one I want to say is that for anybody that's a premium subscriber, you want to make sure, this came up a time or two, you want to make sure that you are using your premium feed when you listen to the show, especially if it's a premium episode. And you want to do it with whatever podcast player you signed up with. So, for example, if you're a premium subscriber, you listen to a show, let's say I like to use Apple Podcast. You click on that, you click on the link, you sign up to become premium. It's going to give you an RSS feed on your Apple Podcast player that you can use to listen to the premium episodes. Otherwise, if you try to just click on, at random on a different player, it's not going to recognize you and you're going to be blocked from the premium content. So I had somebody that was having an issue with that. I think they signed up initially with Spotify and then they were trying to listen to it on another player. It wasn't working right. They ended up signing up on Apple Podcasts, and that seems to work well for them. So whatever podcast player you're using, just make sure if you become premium, whichever one you're signing up with, that is the feed that you're using, especially for those premium episodes. And then finally, we will have a show at some point coming up in the future. I did buy a new microphone. It's ideally for folks that are recording in person, multiple people that can capture multiple voices and supposedly filter them out appropriately. I'm using my original microphone now, but you may hear me test or use a new microphone, even recording by myself in the future. And any feedback, if you guys notice a difference in sound quality, feel free to email the show and let me know. realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com. Okay, with all that said, and without further ado, please welcome to the show first-time guest and also a premium subscriber going by the code name Big D. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time. We're recording this on a Saturday morning. I know there's other things you probably could be doing, but we're here today to talk about tariffs on U.S. manufacturing. And I guess before we get into all that, as much as you'd like to and still maintaining anonymity, would you take a few minutes to introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, what you do, and why you'll be the one talking about this and its impact?
Yeah, so Big D here. I'm the president of a manufacturing company here in the Midwest. The company itself that I operate, that I run, we're approximately a $20 to $25 million revenue company per year. We specialize in high-end manufacturing equipment that is, vital to just American manufacturing in general. Talking about equipment that goes into automotive, aerospace, PCB, IC, general market consumers as well for like promotional products, that type of thing. Some of this equipment is made to manufacture that. So yeah, I'm here just to give you guys a little bit of taste as far as what we're seeing in real time as all this unfolds with the economy and the tariff war overseas.
Yeah, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. I think that, you're probably seeing and have seen this first, I think, before probably a lot of us. I literally got an email from a dealership in a different state. It's a luxury dealership. For those that don't know, I recorded an episode on when Cash Flow King purchases a vehicle, and I talked all about that, so I'll spare you all those details. But apparently I was still on their list, and I literally got an email yesterday that was like, now is the time. You need to, buy a vehicle now to avoid the tariffs, blah, 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 blah. So I don't know how much of a trickle-down effect the end user consumer has seen in different areas or not yet, but I would think that somebody in your position obviously has already been seeing a lot of the effects of what's happened and what's to come. So feel free to start us off with whatever you see fit in terms of how it's affected your business, your industry, and U.S. manufacturing.
Right. Well, when it comes to, I have the same thing in my hometown. I mean, I go back, I go past the dealership, and they've got signs out in the front yard, no tariffs on vehicles. So they're playing that game, but it's only going to last for so long. I mean, they're basically working on inventory is what they're working on. Any new cars, if you had one custom made, that wasn't in inventory, you'll see the impact of all those tariffs because the vehicle hasn't landed in the United States yet. So, yeah, it doesn't get the tariffs. But for somebody like me in manufacturing, we source probably 30% of all of our goods outside of the United States. There's various reasons for that, and we can get into that later if you want. But as soon as those tariffs go into effect, and I already have goods in process in France, Italy, Germany, Mexico, Canada, South Korea, and of course China. So as soon as those tariffs went into effect, I've got probably a little over $2 million worth of orders outside of the United States that if I release any of that product, as soon as it hits the border, the surcharge goes into effect. So it's immediate for us. As soon as it happened, all of our suppliers, not all of them, but some of our big ticket suppliers that we purchase from, they're sending notices out, as far as what they're going to do about it, and it's getting pretty ugly. I can tell you that for sure.
So when they're sending notices out, tell us more in terms of, hey, this is what's going on, and therefore there's going to be adjustment to pricing.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting how people are playing this out from when I'm just buying components, and let's talk about like a PLC or a power supply or something like that. Those vendors flat out, like the day of, they sent out mass emails saying that effective immediately, any products that you purchase from us, you'll see a additional line item on the invoice for the tariff surcharge. This is due to Donald Trump this and that and blah blah blah. Sorry for the inconvenience, and sucks to suck. So they just pass it along. But when you get into higher dollar pieces of components and also equipment, finished products, it seems to be that you have those people out there that says, hey, we have the inventory, we're safe for now, but we won't be in, say, 30 days, right? So you got that, or they'll come back and they'll say, valued customer, we apologize for the inconvenience here. We're going to do everything that we can to lessen the blow of these additional tariffs. So they will say, we will go ahead and absorb 50% of the tariff, and you will absorb the remaining half. So they split it down the middle. Everybody's feeling the pain. We'll feel it as well, and you do as well too. So they're splitting it, and there's some that are just like, hey, too bad, so sad. This piece of equipment cost $5,000 before, and your new price is $13,500.
So do you think, a couple things. First question, do you think when they put those tariff line items on there, Is it very much like, hey, this is the tariff based on where it's coming from, and it's pretty transparent and it's accurate? Or are they kind of like I can only think of a car dealership when they were doing those bullshit market price adjustments during COVID and stuff like that, and they can pretty much make up whatever they want? Like, is this pretty much, hey, this is what it is, and we're not screwing around playing games?
I would say for the most part that it's pretty transparent. That they're, I mean, everybody knows what the tariff levels are for these components.
Right.
I mean, I do, and it's not the stock standard. What is it? What's Trump saying right now? 147%.
Seems like it changes every day. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It changes every day, but that's just a general number that somebody came up with. That on a whole, on average, it's 147% increase. But I made a few notes here. I was talking to my operations manager just before this. Let's see. We've got different levels at 174%, 143%, and 125%. So it depends upon the product that's coming in. I think that a majority of them are being truthful in what they're passing along to the customer, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's people, trying to rig the system.
And the second question is then, for those companies and suppliers that are willing to absorb a portion, I think you mentioned like roughly a 50-50 split, do you think they're doing that in an effort to try to obviously remain competitive, but are using it as a competitive advantage in a way that they say, okay, we're just going to make it up in volume. So if people get the word out like, hey, these guys are eating half of it, and I used to get my stuff from supplier ABC, but now supplier XYZ is taking 50% of that, like let's switch over and use them. Are they playing that to their advantage at all?
For sure. Yeah. And, we'll be doing the same thing. So right now, we're trying to stay competitive by telling people that we have not passed on additional surcharges at the moment, but it could be coming soon. So right now we're in the no tariff zone, and right now I'm actually eating 100% of those. I don't have inventory. Everything that is purchased from our company to our customers are they're build to order products. It's a very specific application that requires, anyways, what I'm saying is that yeah, it's just not good.
So how long, I mean, every business is probably different, but how long can you continue to do that before it's like, all right, we can't eat this anymore because we're starting to, if we've not already gone into the red, like we can only float this for so long?
I have until Friday of next week.
And then
we're going to do the 50-50 game. And that will probably be sustainable for maybe 2 to 4 weeks.
And then what?
And then you have to pass it all on to the consumer.
So it's kind of, are a lot of companies and suppliers doing this in phases, do you think, where they start like, hey, we're going to eat it all, then we're going to subsidize 50% of it, and then we're going to say, too bad, so sad, sucks to suck, and pass it all on to you? Like, how are other businesses handling this, or is it all over the place?
I would say it's all over the place. I would say that probably a majority of them are doing them in phases, just like I am. I do have 9 other subsidiary companies located throughout the world. I've seen their numbers, I've seen their strategy, and it's a mix.
Gotcha. Are you personally / professionally, like, are you the one that gets to make that decision as the president, or is this something that comes down from like the board? So like how is that decision actually made? Who makes the final, here's what we're doing decision?
It's a team approach. I mean, I make all the decisions here, but I'm definitely telling the parent companies, the boards and whatnot, what our strategy is, what we're doing from a week to week basis. But I mean that may change at any point. I have a meeting with several of the board members on Tuesday morning, so we'll see.
Okay. So this is obviously something that you guys, as well as others, are probably monitoring extremely closely, like
day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we just got done with an evaluation yesterday before the end of the day, If we continue to eat these tariffs from a month to month basis, well, the exercise that I did was that I looked back in periods one through three, January, February, and March, and how much equipment we pushed out the door, and what percentage of that equipment came from outside countries that are affected by the tariffs. And if we continue on this path here within the next 2 to 4 weeks, we will be losing anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 per month.
And that, I mean, presumably is not sustainable for an extended period of time.
No, no, not at all.
So what do you think, like, what is the game plan after that? I mean, obviously, it's a day-by-day monitoring situation, but let's just say if we extrapolate that out and say, all right, well, let's assume that nothing changes. We've gone through our phased approach. We're now passing it on completely. At what point?
Well, we're watching what our competition does. Nobody wants to be the first person to increase their pricing by, even 40%. But somebody's going to do it. And once that shift starts happening and you hear that your competitors are doing that, this and that, everybody's going to do it. So everybody's holding on right now, but that holding on period is coming to an end very quickly.
So the end game is basically, hey, we're going to see who moves first. We're going to hold on as long as we can hold on. And then when shit hits the fan and one company or multiple companies do it and everybody else follows suit, now this is just a new standard. And
Yep.
Congratulations, and consumers, like, you're basically going to be eating the cost of all this, right?
Yep. So the average selling price on each piece of equipment that we pump out the door is right now sitting at about 45,000, and I can easily see that price jumping up to somewhere between $55,000 to $60,000 within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think for, I mean, this is obviously a personal finance show, for the average consumer, just let's say the average U.S. consumer in general, the average family, the average person, how does this spill over to their wallet and their pocketbook? What should they be thinking about?
Well, I haven't been watching the prices at the grocery store lately, but, you know, places like, I don't know if you've heard about the situation going on with Walmart in China, right? But I don't know what percentage of the product that they bring in comes from China, but I'd be kind of shocked if it wasn't at least 30% of everything on their shelves comes from China. But they approached the Chinese government directly and asked for them to eat the costs, that it was their problem. They did this to China back in Donald Trump's first term, when he put, what was it, 25-30% on China at that point. Whatever level that we were living with for the last 7-8 years, it stayed at that level. But Chinese government came back and told Walmart to stuff it. Fuck off. That's what
Told them
they
to
did.
suck a big D.
Suck a big D. That's right. And so, yeah, everybody was shocked that the Chinese government actually pushed back at Walmart, because Walmart's huge in China as well. They have, a lot of people don't know this, but I think they have about 17 billion worth of business in China. So, that's a fight in itself. But if you talk about the average consumer, all those products that are sitting on the shelf, I don't know how they're not going to rise by the exact amount of the tariff, like almost immediately. We saw how easily goods were wiped out during COVID, right? So the cycle of, products for the average consumer, they get recycled quite often. I don't think there's a lot of inventory just sitting around at Walmart distribution centers. That stuff is flowing in constantly via cargo ship from China and everywhere else. So, yeah, I 30% on 40%, 60% on those products. I'd be surprised if that wasn't enacted across the board, within the next month.
Yeah, I've not seen this. I don't do a ton of our shopping, really don't do much of our shopping, but I was reading something that was talking about kind of like back almost, during the COVID times where people were stockpiling different things, whether that's coffee or this or that. And I don't know that I've seen that yet. I don't know if you've seen that or heard about that in stores or not, but supposedly, at least to some degree, that's going on. And it sounds like it's only going to become more and more of an issue potentially as we get closer and closer to everything going full throttle.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that's just crazy, man. What else you got over there for us?
Well, I guess for the whole tariff thing, it just seems like it's a wait and see type thing. But definitely there's a wall coming with everybody, not only American manufacturing, but the consumers. I personally think that Trump knows it's coming. I'm crossing my fingers and that some good news is going to be released within the next 7 to 10 days. He did come out, I believe, on Tuesday or Wednesday during a press conference saying that, he basically said, hey guys, don't worry, those Chinese tariffs are, those are going to come down drastically here soon. So even though, the press is saying that, the two sides aren't talking and there's just a big war and nothing's going to happen soon, I think there are discussions happening behind the scene, and I'm hoping that we'll see something break through in the next, again, 7 to 10 days. But if it doesn't, I think we're in a lot of trouble here.
Yeah.
But then you get back to I don't want to sit here and cry about the whole situation. And some people, on one side would be like, well, you need to start sourcing all your components from America, and you need to, and yeah, we realize all that stuff, and there are some things that we can go ahead and pull back in and buy here in the U.S. and maybe it will cost an additional 15%. It's fine. It's not 147%, but yeah, I mean, it's coming to a head in the next 7 to 10 days. I really hope that the administration is able to work out a deal and get this thing on the right path.
I heard something, it was probably a couple weeks ago now, and I don't know how valid this is or not, but it made me think for just a second because people talk about like, all right, well, tariff this, tariff that. And to your point about like, okay, well, maybe we start sourcing stuff from the U.S. But somebody, I forget who it was, I don't know if it was a podcast or a YouTube clip I was watching, and they basically made an argument and said like, okay, yeah, that's fine. But the problem is, if we're going to do that and everyone wants to talk about jobs, you have to have people in the U.S. to fill those jobs and be able to work and willing to work for those wages. And that was something where they were like, they just didn't see that happening. Everybody wants to say, yeah, do this, do that, get it in the U.S., source it in the U.S., but nobody wants to work for peanuts either,
Yeah, the whole wage thing, I mean, that'll never happen. I mean, just look up what they're paying these guys in China. Yeah, it's not just a wage thing, but it's we don't have enough people in the United States anyways. Period. Everybody who's working is working. So go ahead and create.
So who's going to fill those jobs, basically, right?
Who's going to fill them? Yeah.
Wild.
I mean, we'll have to bring in some more people from Mexico, I guess. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was appropriate to say.
No, I mean, that's fine. I mean, we don't.
We're gonna.
This is a personal finance show. Obviously, we have to naturally talk about kind of, especially with a podcast like this, the state of what's going on, and names are going to be mentioned and things are going to come up. This show's not political in any way, and we don't endorse one side or the other. Everybody's entitled to their opinions, and that's fine. I can tell you from the financial services standpoint of things, I'm sure people are probably on edge either thinking about it or possibly, and I thought about this too, expecting me, working in financial services to put something out about, stock market and investing and all that kind of stuff. And, it's been interesting to see, obviously, me looking at my client base, it's a very small sample size, but I like to think that I do a pretty good job of setting proper expectations with clients. And even though there are certain things that are unpredictable and you don't know what's going to happen, in the back of your mind, you almost have to be prepared, depending on the type of investing that you're doing, that at some point something is going to happen. There is going to be movements, and you have to almost anticipate that and try to view it in the context. And I know it's boring and it's cliche and nobody wants to fucking hear it, but of a long-term plan and strategy and those sorts of things. But with that said, and maybe I'll do a show about this, I don't know, but it's a relatively new financial product. It's probably existed for maybe 10 or so years that are becoming more and more popular. There's actually a white paper I was reading about this where a couple of the brightest minds in the industry were talking about how products like this, and I guess I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, so I'll try to keep this fairly short, but they are a pretty good replacement for fixed income or bonds in certain portfolios just based on their characteristics and the way that they are working. And again, I won't go into too much detail on this podcast, but I say all that to say, naturally, there are going to be certain people that have that knee-jerk reaction or are getting closer to retirement or potentially are already retired, and maybe they just kind of got lazy and they've rode the wave over the past decade plus for the most part, where things have been done really, really well, and now all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, maybe I need to pivot a little bit or do something else. We have seen a tick up in folks that are using those types of products, but I wouldn't say it's like a mass exodus and it's anything where like people are running scared. It's just like, hey, you know what? For a portion of my portfolio, maybe I ought to do something a little bit different with this and give myself some downside protection. And it's probably a conversation for another day, but I kind of wanted to just weave that into today's discussion because all of this has an effect across the board. Whether, today we're talking specifically about the impact on U.S. manufacturing, but also how that trickles down to the end user consumer. And then when you start thinking about individuals and this being a personal finance show, how does that translate into their investments and investment strategy and stock market and retirement? And everything is interconnected, right? And nobody, I don't think, has a crystal ball or knows the exact answer, but something that I personally have been thinking a lot about is I think it's really important for people in times like this to still play defense to an extent and be well capitalized and positioned as much as they can be, but not afraid to also play offense and continue investing or make additional investments at the same time. And the billion-dollar question is, and it's going to be different for everybody, but what is the appropriate level of where does that need to be and what needs to happen? There was actually something even in our firm that came out about, I don't want to get too specific, but pretty much some early retirement packages that they're looking at for certain folks that are eligible for those. And in my mind, the writing's on the wall that, there could be something coming down the pike where, there's some people that aren't going to work there anymore, whether that's by choice or not, depending on how that goes. And so just things that people need to be thinking about and positioning themselves such that, you don't play scared and then get behind because you left 100% of your investable assets in cash, but at the same time, you didn't overextend yourself and deploy 100% of your assets into something now that you need access to because shit hit the fan in another part of your life. And so I'll stop there, but I think that this is all interconnected and it forces all of us to think about things, whether it's for our business or if we're running a business or own a business, to our jobs or careers, to our personal finances and our families. And, everything has crossovers and that connectedness component to it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're the expert in everything that you just spoke about. I only understood about 90% of it, but the consumer spending it's going to be a problem because people's wallets are going to get thinner as these prices rise, and I can only assume that means that that's going to make them think twice about their investment decisions. Instead of, well, I better cut back on, contributing to my 401k and that type of thing. I could only see that just naturally happening to people if they have to spend an additional, let's say, 10% per month just providing for their family and their everyday needs.
Yeah, and, this is going to sound crazy for me to say this to some people listening probably, but I actually, and I'm not saying like stop all your contributions, but I actually don't necessarily think for certain folks, and this is a lot of middle America, they're kind of playing on the margins, that's a bad idea. I was listening to this other podcast, and I actually thought they kind of did a shitty job. They had a great title, but they did a shitty job of it. And the title of the podcast was The Middle Class Trap. And it was one of those shows focused on early retirement. And, they talked about a few different things, but I don't really think they went deep enough. And we don't have enough time on this specific show to do that today. But I'll kind of give a glimpse into it. And I think going along what you're saying about, for example, 401k contributions, there are people, and I've seen this in my own professional life with clients, even against our advice at times. There's a story I always tell, and I'll skip over it now. But there are people that put all their money into, and I was guilty of this way back. They put all their money into retirement, and they don't have enough money available outside of retirement accounts. It's all locked up in a 401k or an IRA or whatever. Or they're, Dave Ramsey fans, and anyone that knows me knows my feelings about Dave Ramsey. I think he's great for certain people. I think he's awful for other people, depending on where you fall. And I think we did an episode on him at one point, so I'll leave you to that if you want to go back and listen to it. But he might say, hey, get a 15-year mortgage and pay it off as quick as you can. Now, I'm not saying that's the wrong answer. For some people, that might be the right answer. But what I am saying, to kind of go to your point, where if your grocery bill or whatever, your utilities and whatever your consumption on a monthly basis goes up by, say, 10%, that money has to come from somewhere. Now, some people might get, whatever, raises that meet or exceed that. Most people probably aren't. And so you kind of have to figure out, where's it going to come from, whether that's a contribution reduction on your retirement plan, to cutting spending in certain areas, to picking up something part-time, whatever it is. My point is, I say all that to say, I do think as a potential hedge, I would rather see somebody, this is, I guess, where I'm going, I would rather see somebody have and build a little bit of liquidity at the expense of not putting as much money away into retirement, especially as sort of a defensive mechanism during times of uncertainty. You're not completely withdrawing, but if you need to, maybe you take your foot off the gas a little bit. I don't remember if I talked about this on my episode when I purchased a vehicle, but there's, especially when rates were super low way back, I think we did probably more than one episode where we talked about things like arbitrage. There we go, where you can borrow at a low rate, invest at a higher rate when rates were super low, stuff like that. Well, I bought a new vehicle recently, and I could have written a check and been done, but they were also offering a promotional rate of 3.99%. Did I have to get a car loan? No. Did I choose to get a car loan? Yes. Would it have made a difference for me? I don't know. Probably not. But it makes me feel better knowing that there's a few extra dollars that are sitting there in case I need them in times of uncertainty, that I'm paying a nominal rate on that loan than just writing the check and being done and wishing, shit, something happened and I wish I could go back and borrow that money at 3.99%, but I can't because I already made that decision. So I think there's things like that decisions that people will make, and that's just a small example of something that I did recently, that one of the reasons that I decided to do that.
Well, I was, just sitting here while you were talking, just going through my, going through my head as far as like how that could possibly impact, the middle class of America, and just running through some rough figures in my head. I mean, there's a possibility in the next 2 to 3 months that, the average family making $70,000-$80,000 a year, whatever it may be, but they could see prices rise on everyday stuff that they purchase that would lead up to basically being another car payment. Additional $450 a month they're spending on groceries, Walmart, Kroger, all that stuff. Yeah, the rough numbers in my head, I wouldn't be surprised if the average person would see at least an additional $350 to $400 a month in expense.
Yeah, and
if the situation doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't, and most people don't have it. I mean, I've been fortunate that a lot of the residents where we have some rentals, they're paid on time and everybody's good. We did have one woman who fell behind for several months, and instead of paying closer to the 1st to 5th of the month, she was paying closer to the 20th to the 25th of every month. But she was always, by the end of the month, she had it in. Well, there was another tenant recently, and I noticed they paid right away. Like, they paid right on the 1st. And the way that our property management company does it is if they pay after the 5th, there's a late fee. But as long as they pay by the 5th, there's no late fee, right? Well, I noticed that, this one this one house, they paid right away on the first, but they were literally $175 short. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And a week went by and 2 weeks went by. And here we are towards the end of April. A few days ago, I sent an email about a couple things to the property management company. And I was like, oh, hey, by the way, what's going on with such and such house? And they said, oh, the tenant was sick and they had to miss a couple of days of work and their paycheck was a little short. They're planning to get caught up by the end of the month. Okay. And this is also in the Midwest in terms of part of the country, in terms of where these rentals are and what I'm talking about. And so it just goes to show you, and again, a very, very small sample size, but I think if you extrapolate that out across just the average person, that $450 a month, if their grocery bill goes up $450 a month, that's a big deal. Being out sick a couple days and, having a check that was a little bit short and now you can't come up with the full rent and you're short $175, you probably don't have an emergency fund. You probably don't have the excess available to be able to do that. And so, I do think it's going to have a bigger impact on everybody. And, I guess buckle up because it's going to get ugly.
Yeah, buckle up. Hopefully the administration has something in the works here. But, tightening things up a little bit is definitely not a bad idea these days. In reflection about some of the comments that I made, I don't want to come off as, being one of those people that, that is against what the administration is doing. I'm not going to get into politics, but I will say that I understand the reason why this is going on and what he's trying to do, what they're trying to do. Will it make the American economy better in the future? Absolutely. It will. But we're talking about the short-term effect. And what's worrisome for me is this short-term effect. Is this going to last 4 weeks? Is it going to last 3 months? Or is it going to last 2 years? And the longer that we're going to incur this type of pain in our economy is, the time frame is what it's all about. And if this goes on for 2 years, I mean, we're gonna see some major changes in the economy. Some good, but probably a lot of bad.
Yeah. I'm not an economist or an analyst, but I think that that's pretty spot on. And I don't have my crystal ball, or I'd probably be on the beach somewhere.
Yep.
So who knows what's going to happen? But I think we've given the listeners pretty good insight into sort of the immediate impacts of these tariffs on U.S. manufacturing, how that spills over into other parts for the consumer, and then I guess a little tidbit thrown in at the end there about personal finance and things that people might be thinking about or considering doing, which again I don't think is a horrible idea. If you don't have a big cash cushion and you're one of those people out there putting in 20 or 25% of your pay to your 401k to build it up or something, and they're only matching on the first 6 or 8 or 9 or whatever, and you need to take it down for a little bit to build some cash up, might not be the worst idea in the world, because you don't want to get in a situation where the money you need is locked up in that plan and now you're basically playing with fire. So I think that's good. You got anything else for the listeners today, or are we pretty much there?
No, I think we're pretty much there. I appreciate you inviting me onto the show. I have to say that this was different for me. I've never been on a podcast before, but this is real life, real data, real talk.
Yeah, buddy. Real talk, personal finance. Well, we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate you being a premium subscriber. We'll make sure to get this show edited and out to the listeners. I don't think we put one out yet in April, so I'm going to try to get this out by the end of the month. Just a few days to go. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks to Big D for coming on the show. We will see you in the next episode.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.